Good morning, good sirs.
Jeremy, Henrik, how are you both?
So nice to see you. What's happening?
Not a lot, other than I do have to give advance warning that Liam, the New Zealand pool guy, will be here somewhere in the next 2 hours to take care of the thing that just exploded, and hopefully the dogs won't go apeshit.
That's hysterical on so many levels. So thank you. If you guys don't mind, you can acquaint yourselves with one another. I've got to get a jacket
Go
because
for it.
my heater's not doing enough. I'll be right back. Un momento, por favor.
But
I
okay,
mean, I
Steve.
might recommend them getting some toys. Happen to know a good company that supply those.
I think what they need is noise canceling headphones.
And or a tranquility pill.
Well, actually, we do tranquility pills for this one sometimes. He's a rescue, a little bit needy, and so thunderstorms are a particular frightening thing for him. So he has gabapentin for that.
Oh,
Plus, he
bless.
has a thunder shirt, which is this. It's an outfit that fits him really tight and therefore keeps him calmer.
I made a company that does all these products for dogs, so that's why the slight pitch.
Well, then. So, what makes these toys special, Henrik? I'm curious.
Ooh, how long do you have? I mean, like, it depends what toys. I started something called BarkBox, which is now, I think, probably the largest maker of dog toys in the US. And so we have
Yeah,
many different ones. And so there are some that are catered for specific play styles. There are some that has specific fabric depending on the type of dog it is. There are some that has bacon infused scent. There are all these different ones. There are toys inside toys, and so there's different. But I think the biggest thing is that we make toys that both dogs and their owners find entertaining, and because a lot of energy comes between dogs and people when they both entertain, then the magnitude there's a magnitude interest in the toys.
makes great sense. And this one particularly loves toys, and he will actually carry a teddy bear around without shredding it. He is very gentle with them. He values them.
Oh,
Jeremy,
bless.
yes, we've gone way off topic. It's what we do.
It's really precious actually hearing about a dog that is gentle with its toys. It's quite
You know,
refreshing. My dog is not.
quite a few dogs I like, specifically a lot of rescue dogs, specifically female rescue dogs who have had litters in the past. And so they kind of have these almost pseudo puppy relationship to their toys. My
Intrigue.
dog being one of them.
We had a chocolate lab. He's gone now, but he at one point found a nest of baby bunnies that had been abandoned and carried them to us gently in his mouth, using that sort of retriever thing where they're used to that.
That's
Uh,
amazing. That's
what's that,
that's that's
what's that
awesome.
thing you have there, Jeremy?
This is a sound shield. We're going to see how it works.
I mean, it makes you look like an ass. So there's you halfway there.
It
I
makes me
was
look, it looks bad. Oh no.
It looks like you're having like a mixture of a barbecue grill and an advanced Wi-Fi router in front of you.
I think it's being a Dalek. That's what it is. Is it Dalek or Dalek from Doctor Who? I can't remember.
All right. All right. I'll
Look,
take it
do
off.
the sound shield. We're not judging,
Yes,
except we evidently are.
Oh, you're judging. Oh, you are definitely judging. Yes, this is if the if our producer gets back to me saying that my sound sucks, we know why.
we can fix it in the edit.
Oh, touche, touche, mon frère, touche. So, okay, so this is a conversation, Russ, just to set the stage, or rather, Henrik to set the stage. So, our mutual friend Kevin Williams introduced us to Russ as a spectacular user, inventive user, and I had the chance to connect with Russ, and I can indeed confirm he is a fantastic user. I like Russ, your introduction of yourself as a personal pan pizza marketing team. I think that was so good.
I stole it from my friend Melissa, who talks about two pizza marketing teams, and I'm even smaller than that.
Yeah, I mean, a personal pan pizza, if that's all you need. Maybe just by way of background, and Russ, we'll do kind of official introductions and all that stuff at the end because we find that's better. But just
Okay.
so that Henrik has an idea of where you are, maybe tell Henrik just a bit about where you are, the role that you're playing, and then what I would like to do is actually dive into kind of a, chain of potential GPTs that you lean upon to
Mhm.
kind of, effectively expand your marketing team. And then I'd like to go backwards in time at the end and kind of talk about how you got to this point. So it's almost start by showing us, and then let's go backwards and talk about how you came into your expertise.
And just to be, and I believe this is a field without expertise, which is kind of fun. We're all still figuring it out and discovering, but I am chopping through with a machete, I guess. And when you say show, just for clarity, I can absolutely show visually, but I don't know if the podcast is primarily audio or visual or both. So,
We have posted some visual clips that have done well. So I think we've got the video here. We can use it or not use it. It's primarily audio, but then if there's interesting stuff, then we can always, share video as well. So I would say
cool.
if you want to share your screen, for example, and kind of show what's happening, at the very least it helps us kind of orient.
Yeah. Do you guys see that?
Totally.
Because core would be to talk through a little bit of each of these guys and why I built them and what they do and all. But the other thing is, given that the primary distribution mode is audio, we also don't want to be saying, and if you look here, you see this, because an
Yeah.
audience feels left out.
Yeah.
So I may actually, on reflection, just stick to audio because I can pretty much talk to what they all do.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
But
I think
anyway,
it's
the
I
bigger
think it's
thing,
cool. I think it's cool to see. And if you just instead of saying this, just use names. Adam Adman here. Blah blah blah. It's cool.
oh, he's Amon because I decided he should be Egyptian now, but
Ah,
they
I
changed.
see.
But
I see.
regardless, so start with the use cases, amplifying the personal pan pizza marketer, which is about to change because I just got an acceptance on a person I'm going to hire. But start with that, start with the use cases, and then go into what I remember from our conversation, Jeremy, was a lot about the value of play and discovering and developing these things.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and
that's
that's
the
kind of
theme we want to make sure we cover.
exactly. That's where I kind of want to get to by the end. Exactly. You got it. But start maybe just tell us about the company, tell us what you guys do, tell us what your role is there, and then how you make your job that much easier with ChatGPT.
Works for me. So should I start on that now, Jeremy? You're looking at me
Exactly.
expectantly.
I'm with bated breath, as they say.
Excellent. Well, I've been using Chat GPT and custom GPTs for quite a while. And fundamentally, I'm doing it because I'm a personal pan pizza marketing team, just one person for a small startup. We're called Quantified.ai, and we create role play experiences to train sales professionals, especially in industries like pharmaceuticals, financial services, et cetera, where you have these complex interactions, complex products, and need to have a really well-trained team and know how they're going to perform. But as the only marketer in the company currently, I have to do a lot of things. So I started, because I'd been playing with custom GPTs, making these little purpose-built ones that I started thinking of as team members. And the first one, we do a webinar series. Our customers like webinars. And the problem with webinars is there are a lot of content to create. Invitation emails, landing page copy, social posts, thank you, sorry I missed you emails, about 3 hours of relatively mundane copywriting for a webinar. So the first one I built was called Wendy Webinar. I think of her as a little virtual team member. And I give Wendy the abstract for the webinar, and she cranks out first draft of emails, landing page copy, all of that. And I built her, Jeremy, to be really prescriptive about what she needs, because both junior team members and GPTs, if you don't give them good, crisp direction, they'll, rather than saying, I can't do this, they'll do a crappy job.
And when you say be really explicit about what she needs, you mean what she needs from you.
Yeah. So if I say, hey, Wendy, we're doing a webinar about puppies and I need you to write the content, she'll go, I don't have enough information. I need to know the abstract of the webinar. I need to know the date and time. I need to know the speakers, etc.
That's cool. That's
And
cool.
to be practical, is that something that you put into the description of her? So she knows like here's at least the 5 to 10 things that you need to know before you get going, or have you more generically prompted her of saying, please ask a lot of questions before you get going?
Good question. It's in the instruction set in terms of here is, Wendy, specifically what you need to create a webinar. And if you don't get what you need, rather than generating any copy, tell me, Russ, this is what I need from you.
And so that's been informed by you've run lots of webinars in the past. You kind of roughly know all of the component pieces of a campaign, follow up, et cetera. You have trained in Wendy's custom instructions all the stuff you need, and then you interact with Wendy as basically your webinar guru, and she will start to create based on your historical knowledge of what a webinar needs. She'll start to create the copy that otherwise you'd just be sitting there going, you got your outline and now it's get down to work. Now instead it's pass it over to Wendy, have her do a first pass at all this stuff.
Exactly so. And it truly does become a collaboration. But the thing I've figured out, Jeremy, is when we look at building virtual teams, or GP teams, as I've taken to calling them, that's level one. Level one is what everybody thinks they should do with generative AI, is take the things I don't want to do. I know how, I just don't wanna, and outsource them to a GPT. And then I started playing with what I'm calling, this is my informal framework, I'm making it up on the spot. I started playing with level 2 of custom GPT team members by creating ones to know things that I don't. Because we just described with Wendy, I know how to do a webinar. I'm just lazy and I don't have the time to write all that content, and she can help me jumpstart. What if I create GPTs that know things that I don't? Just like
So what's an example of that? Or when did you encounter the need to have a GPT that knows something you don't? What was it that you realized you didn't know? And what was the process by which you said, what if I could create a GPT that knows this? Tell us that story.
Well, I was working on some revenue operations things. I'm nerdy, but I'm not a RevOps guy. So there were some things in configuring our HubSpot instance that I wasn't familiar with. And I was doing what you usually do, reading the documentation, Googling, reading blogs. And I was remembering when I had a really good RevOps guy, and I would just go and say, Alex, how does this work? Show me how to do this. And he, in 5 minutes, I'd know from him. I'm like, cool. What if I build a custom GPT and I tell it, your name is Roger RevOps, and you've read all of HubSpot's documentation. Here's the instance, the specific version we have, by the way. Here's our specific version of Salesforce, Salesloft, all of our other tools. Here's how they're integrated. So a lot of work up front to take him, to educate him on that. But it's like, now you're my RevOps guy. Hey, Roger, I need to figure out this thing with the suppression list. How do I do that? Oh, in your version, you do this, this, and this. Super easy. And so he now rides shotgun on that stuff. We're spinning up a new email domain for our BDRs. I'm not an expert on that. So I said, hey, Roger, professional development, we're sending you to email school. I need you to learn everything you can about email deliverability. What is SPIF? What is DMARC? What is DKIM? How do we avoid block lists? What are honeypots? I need you to know all of that. You're going to professional development, and when you come back, you'll be an expert.
Okay, so wait, how do you send Roger to professional development?
I just go back to the instruction set and edit. And, it always asks when you go in to edit one, how's Roger doing? What could he be doing better? And for some reason, I like to have these conversations like they're with people. And we're sending you to professional development, Roger. And 3 minutes later, he's ready.
Well, so let's break that down. I mean, you just rattled off a list of acronyms that I'm nerdy, but I'm not a RevOps nerd. I don't know what BDR and all those things are. How do you even know what to draw upon? And when you say, Roger, I got to send you to, on professional development, how do you even know the parameters to include in an update to the instruction set for a task that you acknowledge you actually don't have the expertise to handle yourself?
It does require some trust, doesn't it? But again, we're just using these tools, and they're just tools to amplify what we would do. What would I do when I was trying to configure HubSpot? I would go read all the documentation and filter it through common sense and what I found from Googling. I can totally do that. It's just a really long and slow process. So all I did was tell him execute that process, read their documentation, read blogs, develop an opinion.
What do you think might be level 3 GP staff? You have, stuff that I know how to do, but I can't be bothered to do. You have stuff that I don't know how to do, and it'll take me too long time to learn. What do you think is like the next one?
Next one, hopefully, is Nirvana, but I don't think we're there yet.
We're
Right
close.
now, my straw man on it that I've been playing with is collaboration, and collaboration in 2 ways. One is one of the GPTs I built is a mentor. Her name is Maya, and she's like studied all the great marketing thought leaders. So when I need to kick ideas around, hey, Maya, this is happening. I'm not sure what to do next. I can sort of play a game of ball with her and go, this is what's happening. What would you do? She'll go, well, tell me more about that. I'll tell her, she'll go, well, you could try this, or Seth Godin would do this, or this other person would do that. So there's that level of collaboration, but there's a couple of others. Now that I've made a hire, I'm bringing a new person on. I want us to get on the Teams version of GPT so we can learn what that collaboration looks like, because I don't know yet. And then there's also the ability that I've been playing with, and this is super fun and kind of trippy, to at one GPT inside of another. So if I'm talking to Roger RevOps, but I need an opinion from Amon Adman, I can say, hey, what do you think Amon would think of this, and add him. And I don't fully know how it works yet, but you start to get something like you'd get with 2 team members in a room collaborating. I need to get my ad guy and my RevOps guy in here to collaborate.
And you can bring them into the same conversation. How
Yeah.
how when you describe kind of Maya Mentor and the collaboration you have there, where you have quite you describe that in context of level 3 collaboration. How do you contrast that with the mode of interaction you have with Roger or with I can't remember the other one's name, but because to me those sounded collaborative too. So I just wonder how you think about the distinction between collaboration with the Maya Mentor style GPT versus interacting with a Roger RevOps.
It's a good question, because it does, when it works well, it's collaborative all the way up the stack in certain ways. I guess the core thing is with the others, I'm usually starting with a task. I may know how to execute a task or I may not, but it's very task oriented. When I start playing with them as mentors, etc., it's a little bit more like, let's throw the ball back and forth and explore ideas together.
So it's less task oriented and more kind of objective, perhaps, or even question or challenge.
Question, inquiry, challenge, those are all great words for it, Jeremy.
Have you found anything that it's remarkably bad at, that where you kind of went down something and you go,
Have you had to fire? What Henrik's asking is, have you had to fire a team member,
have you
a
found
GPT
exactly?
member?
Well,
And do you have a GPT to fire the GPT member?
oh my God. Well, I've thought about building myself an HR GPT just to keep myself in line, but I haven't done it.
I'll give you a fun thing while you think of that. At Bark, we have a very snarky GPT HR bot called Bossy, who have the personality of being a little bit of like, why couldn't you be bothered looking on the internet yourself? And so it's quite an entertaining one.
I love that. I love having them have personalities. Mine all typically have favorite coffees as well, just because that way I can reward them by saying, Roger, go get yourself a red eye. Because you guys have seen the research that says ChatGPT performs better when you
That's
tip
so
it.
good. And you know what their favorite drink is. Do you have like their favorite cocktail as well if it's after 5 p.m. or how does that work?
I haven't gone there because I don't want to intrude on their work-life balance.
I understand.
But
That's good.
Except the problem now is that OpenAI is adding memory, they'll remember how many coffees you owe them.
this is why you guys have seen the research that says that ChatGPT performs better if you offer to tip it. I came up with the coffees because I don't want Skynet to have a run-in tab on me. I really don't.
That's well, they can always Skynet can show up at your front door, and you could conceivably bang out a few pots of coffee, you know?
Yeah, I got an espresso machine here. I can do it, I think.
Exactly, exactly. You could just go for the weekend.
But I want to,
That's
if we can wing back, because the question you asked specifically, I'm trying to remember, Henrik, it was on the collaboration aspect. Oh, what they don't do well.
Just what they don't do well, because I imagine like you probably also have spent a bunch of time figuring that out. And I imagine that people listening to this might go like, okay, at least I don't have to go down that rabbit hole.
I mean, the big thing that I've found that they don't do well is, in a lot of ways, ChatGPT is a Labrador retriever. It's so very eager to please. And so, just like a junior team member, an intern that's super eager to please, I think of them a lot as almost being wired like interns. If you don't give them what they need to do a good job, they'll still do their best to please you. And that's why I always include in the instruction sets lines like, Wendy is a super competent professional, expert in her field. She knows what she needs to succeed, and she's assertive in asking for it if she doesn't get it. So unless Wendy has a detailed abstract of at least a page and these other elements, rather than cranking out content, she will say, here's what I need. And that took me a while to figure out, because they will, otherwise they'll just sort of do lousy work and try to please you.
You have done an amazing work of setting up these agents. And it seems that a lot of people that we talk to that have a good workflow is kind of doing this personifying different type of works. But it also seems for many people it's really difficult to get into. Like there's this, it's not a technical barrier, because obviously it's relatively simple to make these, but it's almost like a creative barrier of thinking of like, who would I hire to this job, to stay in your analogy. Do you have any advice to offer in how do you get going on this journey? Like, how do you hire the first GPT staff?
Well, a couple of things. First off, I don't think anybody should start trying to build one for work, because we learn fastest and best when we're playing. So I was talking with a friend the other day that wants to get started. She said, where should I start? I said, you love to travel, Kathleen. Write yourself the world's best travel agent that knows all of Kathleen's quirks, likes and dislikes, places she's visited. Because in that, you're working in something you really love and care about. Not that I don't love and care about work, but you know what I mean. And so that let her play and get started. So one principle that I would advise is don't start with work. Start with something that feels like play would be, to me, a pretty important thing.
that I just want to resonate with that for a second, Russ, because one of the things that I found in many corporate settings and larger organizations, things like that, there's kind of just a lack of imagination when it comes to what are applications at work. And I think the truth is, most folks don't care that much, you know. And I've said in the kind of innovation space for 15 years, if you don't care, don't bother. Care is kind of an essential prerequisite. And part of the challenge, I think, when it comes to GPT-ifying work is ultimately it's like, I just got to get this done anyway. I don't really, there's that lack of passion. Whereas taking someone personal, and I love your point about a personal GPT. I've often said to folks, just take a personal decision you're trying to make and ask ChatGPT to ask you a bunch of questions about whether you should grow your family or move to this place or make this big decision or whatever it might be. But if it's personal and if it's emotional, it's likely to elicit the kind of reciprocity from the user that it's required to make ChatGPT do a good job. And I see the same thing. You call it play, I call it passion or care or whatever it might be, but the same thing to your advice. What are other kinds of or what's the question maybe someone could ask themselves? You said to Kathleen in this example, you love travel. What would you ask someone if you didn't know them as well as you knew Kathleen to give them a start on a personal GPT creation project? How would you help them know where to start?
Good question. I mean, that comes down to what we learn to do in sales and marketing conversations anyway, which is to figure out what things people care about. So I think you'd have to start by, I mean, at least what I'd do is start by saying, so what do you love? What are your hobbies? What was your last great vacation? And look for the things that they light up about. I mean, you've seen my background. You understand that I have a lot of guitars behind me. I like to play guitar, so the first one I built was a song tutor to help me pull together tablature and lyrics and chords when I wanted to learn a song. And then I started going, well, this could be more fun. So I programmed it to, if you ask it, teach me to play Wonderwall, it will say, maybe.
That's perfect.
It's a dad joke. What can I say?
That's so good. That's so good.
You remember the movie Wayne's World?
Oh, yes. It actually has one about Stairway too, if that's where
It
you're going.
has that where it says no stairways to heaven as they enter into a guitar shop.
Really,
That's
brilliant. I love that. And actually, if you ask the one that I built, and it's probably degraded by now, I haven't used it for a long time, teach me to play Stairway to Heaven, it will say no stairway denied. So
that's so
direct
good.
quote from Wayne's World.
That's so good. Okay, so starting on the journey, going back to Henrik's question, which is exactly where I wanted to go to. First thing you'd say is find something that you care about, something that you love, something that you're interested in, and build for yourself. Do you just are those the training wheels and now they're off and they're gonna figure out what to do next? Or do they come back to you with certain kinds of questions or ideas? And if so, what's kind of the next step in, call it a actual human's ability to grow in their GPT journey?
It's a good question, and I'm still figuring that out. It's not like I've guided a lot of people through it yet, but my gut would be start with what you love and don't settle. If you remember people's first exposure to Chat GPT, if you were talking to people a year or so ago, it's like, oh, well, I used it to write, an invite to my kid's birthday party, or I used it for this simple thing. And there's this really, because it can do those things so simply and effortlessly, it's really easy to go, oh, that's what it does. I know how it works now.
Right, right.
And so when you've built your song tutor and it like brings back basic stuff that you could get with 5 minutes of Google search yourself, don't settle. Say, how can I make this better?
Yeah, I actually wrote a blog post a couple weeks ago that was, I think the most dangerous thing about Gen AI is not the existential risk, but it's that it will perform to one's low expectations. And if you have low expectations, it'll do it. And you go, that's all it can do. It's exactly what you said. The big danger is people basically a self-fulfilling prophecy of expecting it can only do so much. Rather than that to me is the greatest danger because people leave going, oh yeah, I get that. It's like, no, you don't. If you get it, if you think you get it, you're in trouble. But low expectations have a way of being easily fulfilled. And then people go, oh, yeah, and now I'm back on Twitter or whatever, not recognizing it's a fundamentally different kind of thing. So don't settle. How would you define not settling in this context? If you're telling your friend, Kathleen, don't settle, how would she know if she's settling and how would she know if she's decidedly unsettled?
If she builds it and then when she's planning a vacation in a few weeks, doesn't even think to use it, she just, she built a toy, right? And a toy is nice. We all like a toy, but you play with a toy and you discard it. What I would look for to know whether you're settling or not is continued utility, usage, and continued healthy dissatisfaction. The ones that I use now for work, I tweak a lot. I give them, I'm like, I recently fed Wendy back a bunch of the webinar content she'd created after our edits. And I'm like, hey, so that this is what you generated. And here's what we turned it into. And I want you to learn from that so you can get better. So there's that sort of learning where you feed things back to each other, or even from one to another. I'll take Amon Adman's input and feed it into Roger RevOps sometimes. But then there's also the continued tweaking of the instruction set. When you recognize they're doing okay, but not great, it's like, okay, go in and play with the instruction set to try to make them great. And I know that feels like a lot of work. I'd like to think, although I haven't measured specifically, I have about 3x my personal productivity here. I think if you're not doing that, if you don't look at this and go, I'm getting a boost, I'm getting an amplification, don't settle. Go back in and
I
work
uh,
harder.
Yeah.
the measurement that I think I discovered the other day was I'm getting to a point now where the limiting factor is no longer my output. It is the people in my universe's kind of ability to take in stuff, right? Like, so and I think that's just such an important kind of period of like a moment, because then you're really kind of getting to the point where it's very obvious that using GPT is something that frees you up because, yeah, like, no. I had a question for you.
Henry, before you go on a different topic, can I just ask one clarifying thing about what Russ was just saying? Or rather, just kind of put a fine. I think one thing, Russ, we've been hearing from our audience is they like to hear how we think about what our guests say. And just to kind of like put a full point on what you just said, you need to find something that that you could conceivably use regularly, and then push yourself to use it regularly and update it regularly in order to improve it. And if you aren't using it regularly, I love what you said. If you aren't using it regularly, you've made a toy. So find something that if it worked, you'd want to use it a lot. And when it doesn't work, invest the effort to refine it. I think that's a really important point. And so I just kind of wanted to put a bow on that. So anyway, Henrik, go for it.
I was reminded of something when you were talking about it that maybe I'll just add. A new trick that I started to do is to take books that I own and I enjoy, and I'm not quite sure if you're allowed to do this or not, but I think since I paid for the book, I probably am, and I'm not sharing my my GPTs. But for example, like I've started to work with like a professional coach who constantly kind of reminds me of books that I should read. And I read the books and I'm very excited about them, but it's tough to store this stuff in memory, right? And so increasingly now I'm taking, my synthetic version of the coach, and I'm just adding like the books that he's adding to my reading list. And so now in between sessions, when I have like a question, I have this ability to go and consult with coach, but also now increasingly all the books that he's picked for me, and then obviously that the GPT then makes reference to. And I find that it's kind of like an interesting way to coming back to a bot, because I often have questions, about what I should do at work. And because now that it's so good to just spit really educated stuff at me, even if it's wrong, I start to use that quite a lot. And so it's interesting, like maybe as we're talking about how do you start with a toy, but I think even within the construct of personal, like on work, you can also start with something, you can do something that's relatively personal. And then of course you could do the stuff that you just hate to do. And both of those things are probably things that you would go back to relatively often.
So here's a little bit of a radical question, Russ, just based on where you said you're at. You're about to grow the team. Set the context for a second. Here's Russ, who is 3xing his personal output, leveraging GPTs, who's about to grow his human team. Here's my question for you, because I think a lot of leaders are grappling with, how do I call it GPTifying into OKRs, into measurement, into annual reviews, et cetera. I'd love to hear, even if you've never thought about it, just thinking about it live kind of would be great. How do you think about, because it's one thing to say, like you bring on a junior marketing person, there's kind of conventional marketing measures for their success, right? How do you think about incorporating Gen AI and GPT oriented measures, metrics, et cetera, into a junior person's role, knowing the potential they have to unleash and multiply that person?
What a really great question. And literally my next task after this is writing a 30, 60, 90-day plan for this new hire. So I'm gonna free form on that just a little here, if I may.
Please. No, I love it. Yeah, let's like riff, because you don't have to I think it's just important to go, we need to be measuring this stuff. I think the reason a lot of organizations aren't making progress is because it's okay to not make progress.
Well, and I heard, and this may actually have been on a previous podcast of yours, I heard somewhere about a company that gave its employees access and then basically, I don't want to say reprimanded or disciplined, that sounds so awful, but they noticed who didn't use it. They paid attention, and that's one
Mhm.
reason that we will move to Teams, is so I can understand usage. Is everybody using it? So I think, there is some level of monitoring there. But it's also worth remembering, as much as I love these tools, they are only tools. So I'm going to an extent assess the person primarily on their output, on what they get done. But what I can assume they can get done, if we're assuming this 3xing of human potential, I don't know how they're going to do it if they don't adopt. Fortunately, I know the person. They are desperate, really interested in adopting. It's somebody that I've worked with in a past role for years. And so I have no worry that they're going to dive right in and learn. But I think you're right. I need to figure out how to make it explicit in the onboarding, in the 30, 60, 90, in the OKRs, and in one-on-ones. Oh, you launched this campaign. Tell me how you did it. Oh, you wrote the landing page copy. Did you think about using a GPT for that? Why or why not?
Yeah, well, so what you're saying there is you don't have to measure, you don't have to necessarily measure usage if you're measuring output with the assumption, or if you've set a high enough output bar that it's impossible to achieve without an Iron Man suit. Then you go,
Yeah.
if you're not hitting the bar, it's because you're not strapping on your Iron Man suit. I think there's one kind of contribution maybe I'd make here, just insofar as you're working on your 30, 60, 90 plan. One thing I've been thinking about is not success, but attempts. And so,
Mhm.
which is to say, it's not that I want you to make a better, webinar campaign. I want you to make at least 5 iterations to the approach by which we make the webinar campaign, right? Because I can't guarantee success. I know innovation is a low stakes game and it takes effort. What I want to be measuring and what I might recommend is measure the at bats and how many times does this new junior person edit the GPT. That's actually what I care about, right? Because then what you bake in is, of course, they're using it. And then they're thinking about why didn't it work and what could I do differently, right? And even if it doesn't work or does work, you end up driving the kind of behavior which I think you want, which is engagement with the tool, thoughtful engagement and refinement of the tool.
And this is why, Jeremy, that's priceless. And this is why a moment ago I was very uncomfortable saying the words, discipline or whatever that I used, because people, I mean, any of us that have trained animals, we were talking about dogs earlier, they learn from carrots, not sticks. And the idea of the carrot, I want you to experiment and I want you to take a lot of different tries and try things without, if you have this expectation that everyone needs to be a success, there's nothing that shuts down creative thinking more than that. To think creatively, and you know this better than I do, obviously, because of your research area, but psychological safety is super important to people being able to be creative and come up with new use cases. So rewarding at bats, you're trying, you took a swing, you struck out. It
Right.
was glorious. Let's celebrate that.
Well, I mean, to that point, like, what does it look like to not even celebrate, but require glorious failures? Which is to say, at the 6 month mark or at the 90-day mark, I want you to show me 3 spectacular flame outs that you never would have achieved if I hadn't not only given you permission, but told you I expect you to do something radically that's gonna crash and burn so spectacularly, we've got to debrief it, right? But you can almost then it's not just about even iteration or implied success, but you actually want this person to be pushing far enough that they make mistakes, right? So that because then what you're saying is we know we're not going to innovate unless we are exploring broadly. So I'm going to reward the broad exploration first.
I love this. Years ago, I was a small player on a large marketing team early in my career. And because the company had gone through a lot of odd stuff, as companies do, the team was very risk averse. So the new VP that came in, and I thought this was brilliant, he launched a frog award under the concept that you need to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince. So he gave the frog award each quarter to the most spectacular and audacious failure that somebody had tried, to create a cultural DNA of it's okay to fail. I actually want to see you try and fail a lot. So that's something I can steal, is the frog. I'm stealing the frog. And I'm merging it with your comment there because that's brilliant.
The AI frog. The question that I had earlier was a little bit on the philosophical, which is where Jeremy and I sometimes love to go, even though we try to force ourselves to be very practical.
It's
Um,
both. It's both philosophical and practical.
but
A little practical.
practical. But the question is, a lot of it's very interesting to see how you're personifying the bot. And I have a follow-up question, but the first one is how do you think about giving these bots a personality, and what do you think might be the importance of doing so?
I was literally in an argument last week with a friend that's a computer science professor, so should know more than me, and actually does in all areas, to be completely humble. He's like, you're doing this wrong. You're treating them like people. That's very dangerous. They're applications. You should build them as apps. And maybe, you give, let's say Piper the product marketer. Maybe you give, that shouldn't be called Piper the product marketer. It should be called product marketing bot, and give it like an image that's not a person. And the reason I think that is not as good an idea, and by the way, I do get better output from AI than he does, is because generative AI is kind of abstracting away the programming layer from a lot of what we have to do. It's designed for us to interact in a natural language way. And it's not that calling her Piper makes her perform any better in an abstract, but it makes me prompt her differently, because I've thought about the fact, what is her background? And actually, I need to retrain her, because right now she's too theoretical and framework oriented. I need her to be better on competitive analysis and stuff. So she's going to be going to school in a little bit. But I prompt her better when I think about who she is. And I even, how it creates a default avatar. And let's be honest, the default avatar is usually a stiff person in a suit. And I work in startups. I don't work with stiff people in suits. So I've started getting very directive just to help me prompt better in, Roger, has shaggy hair and an earring and wears a HubSpot t-shirt. And, Amon, the ad guy, he wears a black leather jacket and a t-shirt with ROAS, return on ad spend, across it. So I feel more like I'm talking to a real person I might work with there, and therefore I prompt better, which yields better output. It's a way of tricking yourself, I believe.
That's such an insightful answer. Thank you so much for that. My follow-up question is where it gets even more philosophical. No, in some of my work, we are now increasingly taking these GPTs and we are making them customer facing. So you're now having conversion flows and kind of re-energizing the whole concept of conversational commerce and what have you. The interesting thought that we're trying to figure out is, as you are expressing your business through a chat interface, and so as a marketeer, you're being ripped the classic assets that you can normally do to evoke your brand ethos. You don't have colors, you don't have logo, you don't have cool pictures. You basically just only have a text prompt. And so in a way, aligned to your thinking on these thoughts that you made, how would you think about, in a world that is increasingly conversational, to take your brand ethos and then communicate it through a text chat interface?
Great question. Where does brand happen?
I mean, like, if you ask me, I think brand is what people say to other people when your name is mentioned.
Which I love that, +1, and enthusiastically endorse, which means that brand is happening really in the mind of your customer, isn't it? It is, yes, you have your brand book, but that's branding, the tools you use to try to influence the outcome. That's all they are. Brand is happening in the customer's mind. So I think it's a super exciting time for marketers, because if we go, brand happens in the customer's mind and in the customer's conversations, per your point, with others. I used to influence that with a book of colors and fonts, and, well, we're a very serious, authoritative brand. We're a fun, crazy brand. It's like, okay, all of a sudden I don't have colors and fonts, but I haven't lost my charter of trying to influence how people think of us. So what tools do I have? Well, I've got the chat, I've got words, I've got the way the chat is merchandised. How can I work within those? It's a really provocative question, and I think it's going to separate the marketers that work from first principles from the ones who simply copy and imitate, which means the real innovators in marketing are going to shine through.
I
It
think
comes
so
down to
too.
voice to me. I mean, the way I would say it is voice, which is distinctively its word choice, right? And in a way, text is perhaps a truer articulation of brand than color or font or anything else. It's what's your voice, right?
And
Yeah,
one thing, for example,
absolutely.
that we've discovered, which is interesting, is voice is, for example, also what you don't talk about, or what you refuse to talk about, or where you are where you disagree quite a lot. And so, obviously, out of the box, most of these GPTs are pretty agreeable. And so, if you have a brand voice that have a perspective about, like guitars, you're selling guitars, then you probably want to be pretty explicit about, you don't want to talk about violins, right? You might even want to hate on, like the flute, just to kind of like invoke a specific emotion.
Hey,
Those flute
there's no
guys, they drive me
stairway.
crazy.
There's no stairway.
No stairway. But
Uh, I
I
want
love
to,
that.
Russ, I want to, one part of your story that you and I discussed in our previous conversation that I want to make sure that our audience gets to hear and that Henrik gets to hear is talk to us for a moment about how you started this journey, because I think it's a non-trivial and very important point. I'm referring specifically to an unfortunate event or to maybe something that you folks don't give enough emphasis to or value upon.
Well, there are unfortunate events if we choose to think of ourselves as in a Lemony Snicket world. I try to be a little more optimistic, although I did love those books when kids read them. Um, about a year, yeah, just about a year ago, maybe a little more, I was laid off. And it was great company that I left, treated very well. It just, we weren't growing the way we needed to grow, and we didn't need the team size that we had. And it made sense for the senior director to stay and meet it apart. And they were gracious and great in handling that with me. And when I left, the first thing I did was what any responsible person did was I freaked out. I went, how will I make a living? I'm being tossed out into the worst market in the world. Yes, they were kind with severance, but they're not going to pay me for the rest of my life, right? So it left me struggling. And I started, because I knew I needed to make money, I started consulting. I'd actually met the founder of Quantified a few years ago and been impressed by what he was building, because he was building this before Gen AI was on most people's radar. And so I pinged him and said, hey, I've been giving you a lot of free advice. I need you to start paying me. He said, okay. So I had my first client. I got a couple of other clients, but that gave me the flexibility and the runway to play a lot because I had seen this Gen AI thing happening. I was fascinated. I was slightly frustrated that we weren't doing more with it at the past company, although they've now made some good strides in that direction. But I really dove into it and played with it in a way I hadn't played since back when the internet was happening in the early 90s. I was a bartender with lots of time to screw around on my off time. And so plugging stuff together and installing my first modem and seeing what was out there before there was even really a World Wide Web.
You
So
know,
that was it. Time to play.
I mean, one of my intellectual heroes, I think Henrik as well, Amos Tversky said famously, you waste years when you can't waste hours. And he was referring to how he and Danny Kahneman reinvented economic theory as we know it, right? But his point was time to play and time to explore is critical. And I feel, to me, when I heard that, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important. There is an imperative to make time. And right now, in our hyper kind of the irony, by the way, of the kind of GPT movement is the whole value premise is about efficiency, and efficiency is all about squeezing more into time, and doing more and being more productive. But what I've heard you say, what I hear a lot of people say is it's when I was let go that I finally had a chance to dive in and explore these tools that give me a chance to 3x myself. I wonder, do you have any thoughts, having gone through that experience, somebody who's not in the, Lemony Snicket's unfortunate event of, finding themselves with more time on their hands, how do they make time if someone hasn't made time for them, so to speak? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I want to come back to that because I want to make one other point on why I think this matters so much and why I routinely use the word play about it.
Please, please, please.
Why do we play?
Enjoyment.
Survival. Think about it.
Mm,
Babies play,
mm.
children's play, tiny kittens and puppies play, baby rats play. I know this because we had baby rats on New Year's Day when my daughter was 7. We were kind of a weird family. But then think about a newly born creature in the wilderness. Why the heck would you play? You potentially are calling attention to yourself from predators. It seems very much counter-evolutionary. And I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but I do have a raging case of Dunning-Kruger syndrome. So I think I know why. I think play is the fastest way to explore a radically new environment and gain mastery of the skills you need to succeed and survive there. So that's why I think we play. Otherwise, we just wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Bo Lotto is a neuroscientist that I've followed for a long time. He's got a great book called Deviate. And one of the things that he talks about is it's one of the only environments where uncertainty is actually sought. We love and uncertainty that nothing new happens until we get in the uncertain arena. And yet the only time we actually embrace and seek out uncertainty is in play. It's kind of the one arena of human endeavor where uncertainty is a benefit rather than a liability. So I totally agree. Now back to the now that you've made that meta point, which I really resonate with and appreciate. It's a great, soundbite for, Instagram and such. What does somebody do? How do they rationalize or create space to play when they're under the gun to deliver more, to be more efficient, to be more productive? How do you create this space? Granted, survival hinges upon it. How do they do it practically?
It's really hard, right? Because if I say this is all about survival, it's like saying you need to laugh or I will shoot you. You know, you can't laugh in that environment. You really can't. So we were talking earlier about tricking yourself into doing better prompting by personifying the GPTs. I kind of think you have to trick yourself. And by the way, I didn't do it. I got fortunate and got laid off. It's not easy. But I think you have to find ways to carve out the time. You have to find ways to have that time and go, this is going to be completely unproductive, and that's totally cool. You have to find that's why, by the way, I encourage people start with something that you love, because then you actually will take evening and weekend time rather than saying, I know I should be studying that AI stuff, but I don't have time this weekend. I'm busy. So I think that's it. Find ways to get into it with things you love, trick yourself into allocating the time, have some, and ideally, if you do that, you might find it starts to lift your work once you get into going, oh, I can build a GPT to help. The other thing though, and I know you guys know this, so I'm not going to belabor the point, is get GPT 4.0, right? Get a real subscription. Don't just
Of
play with the
course.
free thing. The free thing is fine for learning, but I have another friend in CS that I talked into it over the weekend, and he was like, I had no idea it was this
Mm.
powerful.
We often say friends don't let friends use GPT 3.5. But Russ, unsolicited advice here, just going back to the
Sure.
question of the 30, 60, 90-day plan for your new employee. I wonder it's an interesting question to say. We talked a lot about um, ratcheting up the expectations to where only they can be achieved with, superpowers. And at this countervailing aspect, which you just brought out, is you also have to create an environment where the person can be unproductive and not be self-conscious of it. And so I don't know exactly how to resolve that, but insofar as you said you're getting off this call to think about 30, 60, 90, I think obviously you know it, but I just wanted to call it out. It feels like that's the countervailing force here is how do you create the expectation and permission around play for somebody who feels like I got to get there and immediately prove my worth and demonstrate at, ROAS, right? I don't know. It's just an open question to me.
It's a good one, and it's one that I'm going to think a lot about. I will say it's not really different from the challenges we've always had in managing people, in the sense that I believe that people do their best job when they're fully engaged, when they're leaned in, when they're laughing, when they're willing to play, when they're willing to take risks. We've all seen Google's research and all the stuff on psychological safety. So it falls to us as leaders, oddly, whether we're managing little GPTs or managing humans, to create the environment where they can flourish. And if they don't, it's on us.
That might be a good place to start to wrap up, right? Because we're also running out of time. Before we forget, Russ, can we get you to do a hi, I'm Russ, this is what I do, and obviously mention anything that you would like to have on the front end of this. And the way that we normally flow is we make a little intro and then we cut to you making that little like self description, and then we cut into the rest of the story.
Sounds great. I'll give it a go. And if it's not on target, you guys tell me, because I know you know how to edit. And by the way, I love the hand zoom gestures. I do. Hi, my name's Russ Summers. I'm VP of Marketing for Quantified, Quantified.ai. We are a role play and practice solutions for sales teams selling complex products. And I spend a lot of time amplifying myself and playing around with generative AI.
I mean, that was very good. We tend to try to take two because sometimes when we take the second,
Always take two. Always take two. I wonder if in the second take, Russ, one thing that I feel like would be cool, because this will be basically the first thing somebody hears after we say, Russ, thanks for joining us. It'd be cool for someone to hear, I have found a way to 3x myself, or some way of, for lack of a better word, quantifying the AI. But say, I'm a marketing leader who I found through the use of generative AI, I have multiplied my output, not just increased it, but multiplied. I don't know, something like that. If you want to try to incorporate that.
I love that. Of course, now people are going to want to audit me and see how I prove the 3x, but it just feels
no, we're going to send Standard & Poor's right over. They'll be there. Actually, Henry's got a guy at Moody's. I think we'll use them.
Excellent. So we'll give this another shot. Hi, I'm Russ Summers. I run marketing for Quantified. That's Quantified.ai. We're a role play and practice solution using generative AI for sales teams selling complex products. And I've been working with AI for a couple of years now. I've built a little GP team of GPTs that assist me, and I've used that to 3x my output as a one-person marketing shop.
I mean, I think that was better.
Mic drop.
Cool.
Mic drop. Russ, you're amazing. I think this is going to be a fan favorite. I really believe it. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you're willing, because we're nerds, I would say we are, it's not a show. We're genuinely interested. If you have thoughts, or even if you want to spitball on a 30, 60, 90 day thing, I won't speak for Henrik. I'm happy I mean, I realize you have Roger available and Helen and Mira and all of these GP team members. If you want a human team member, just to even bounce stuff off of, this is a question I'm borderline obsessed with right now. And I would love to know what you're thinking and how you frame it. Cause I'm trying to learn myself. So.
Awesome. I will absolutely run it by you because I would love your input on it. I'll get good input from the rest of the team, but I'm pretty sure you'll bring a lot of great stuff.
Beautiful. Thanks, Russ, for joining us. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you so
Guys,
much.
I have enjoyed this.
Yes, you're amazing. Have a great day. And we'll send you clips and stuff before we go live.
Oh yeah, and when you're getting ready, by all means, share stuff, and I would love to help promote it in any way I can because I am a marketer and I like to do that stuff.
Appreciate it.
All right, laters.
Adios. I am a marketer.
Dude,
how great was that guy?
He's incredible. And, it is so fascinating how there are these golden nuggets of people. And I mean, partly to his point, often it's not the big companies who have these people, right? It is the one-man band that, need it. And so therefore they really start to use it. Do you need a second to think about your takeaways, or do you want to riff?
I mean, to me, I love his points about play and about discovery and about starting personal. I think it's so important. It can't be said enough. Work is not the place to start. The place to start is in your personal life. And then having a commitment to iterate. I love his kind of criteria of are you settling? I thought that was a wonderful criteria. And it's true, certainly for work applications, but in your personal life, my own kind of layman's perspective is folks are much more honest about whether they're settling because the vacation, they aren't going to settle for anything less than the ideal vacation, for example, right? And they're going to demand that their GPT deliver it. And if they'll commit to a habit of using a GPT as a way to inform refinements, they're going to start to go, it does what? Could it do that at work? Could it do that with my TPS report, to quote Office Space? I think that is the big unlock for folks, that most people are trying to start with work and just find they can't summon the activation energy required. It's because they don't care enough, and they should shift to an area that they do care about and watch the inspiration flow downstream into their work life.
I think that's spot on, and both you and I, talking to a bunch of people who are trying to figure out how to get this more into their organization, and like never has that statement or that quote that you made been more true, right? You really waste, years by not wasting hours on this, and it is probably easier to waste hours if you're playing. The other thing that I thought was just an interesting way of thinking about it is this level 1, 2, 3 of personalities that you could hire in your organization, like the AI hires that you should be making. And so the level 1 being basically stuff that you can't be bothered to do, that you wish somebody else was doing on your behalf. And level 2, which is really about stuff you don't know. So maybe even like a specialist kind of like role that it will take you a long time to figure out. And the third one is this thing of like collaboration, like stuff where you feel you need to workshop it with somebody because you might not even know what the specific task is yet. I think that's kind of like, I never heard that kind of way of framing it before, which I thought was fascinating.
It reminded me, who was it? Maybe you remember a past guest. We may not have published the episode yet, so audience members may not be able to tell us. We have a lot in the can. But I feel like we had someone who talked about when you're applying for a job, see if you can get a GPT to do the job you're applying for. And basically your application is, see how much more I can do because this GPT can do what you've kind of advertised as a position. Do you remember that? It just kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, it was the incredible Ethan Mollick who basically recommended to his MBA students that as they're applying to jobs, they should walk in with a GPT that was doing everything they were being asked to do and saying, I'd like a pay rise on the first day.
Of course it was. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. But it just goes to show when you think about filling roles with these people, so to speak, with these personalities, it really unleashes what's the human there for, what's the human capable of, and this higher order reasoning and orchestration and chaining things together. I think Russ is a great example of he's a little glimmer on the horizon of the kind of unlock that I think Ethan's referring to. And Ethan's kind of got the great theoretical, philosophical, empirical evidence for it. Russ to me is kind of a quintessential example of no, they're really people who are being unleashed like this by working in a different manner. So super fun to have the balance on the show.
And I think with that, it's time to wrap up from another episode of Beyond the Prompt. And this time it's my turn to back. If you like the show or anything of it, we would love to know. So please connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you do like it, we would also really, really appreciate it if you could share it with a friend or go in and like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And with that, Jeremy Otley, I think it's off from this time. Thank you so
Henrik
much.
Wardlin, it's been a pleasure as always. Good times. That was good.
Loved it. I was thinking about doing Guy Kawasaki next time.